What really happened with your host, Mike Rivero. You're listening to the Republic Broadcasting Network, where you'll find out what the Fukushima's going on.
And aloha, America. Welcome to our show today. It is Friday, July 14th, 2017, getting into the middle of the month here. And we have got a lot of stuff to talk about today. The phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Mike is in our control room, twiddling the dials, keeping us out of trouble. And, of course, the lovely Lady Claire will be joining us in hour number 3 of our program today here. Boy, looking at the corporate media, they basically have got two stories going on. Russia, Trump collusion, and how Wall Street has broken new records today. Of course, we know those numbers on Wall Street are pretty much irrelevant almost at this point because they just don't they don't mean anything. They're all manipulated. And so let me just do this real quick and get my text window back. Just dealing with some technical issues here having to do with Skype. There we go. All right, well, that's going to have to work. I got to sort this out. Skype's having all kinds of problems today. All right, so getting on back here, the corporate media is they're laying it on thick about this Russia collusion. They're trying to find all these people who say this was a Russian-American lobbyist. This person had relatives who were in Russia. They were all dealing with Russia. They're still out there pounding on this situation. And the odd thing is, the polls are currently showing that as the corporate media and the Democrats keep pounding on this issue, it's costing them credibility. And people are starting to sympathize with Donald Trump. He's obviously the victim of an intense smear job, and hardly anybody's buying this nonsense, but they're still out there pushing it. More and more indications that John McCain was the globalist point man in this effort to destroy Donald Trump. And apparently McCain dispatched an emissary who flew across the Atlantic to meet the source of these now discredited documents at an airport, which the Guardian will not name. And it was all very clandestine. The aide was instructed to look for a man with a copy of the Financial Times, and that's how they met, with the source taking McCain's emissary back to his house and giving the American a copy of the documents. Within 24 hours later, the dossier was in Washington. Although the contents of the file couldn't be verified without an investigation, McCain was one of the people who got a copy, and he walked it over to the FBI. So that's the chain of custody of this now discredited dirty dossier, if you will. Good name for it right there. And they're still pounding on this, and I don't know why. I mean, there is no way that Donald Trump can be taken out of the White House and Hillary Clinton put in short of an outright civil war. So I don't know why they're still out there doing that. I realize that Trump is considered unreliable and a danger to the deep state narcocracy. But they really are flogging a dead horse on this one. And what's really, I think, calling attention to itself is how the corporate media is ignoring all the evidence of wrongdoing by Hillary, by the Democrats, by Podesta, by McCain himself, while they spin these fantasies about the evil Donald Trump and the evil Vladimir Putin, and they're going to destroy the world, so forth and so on. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has put Loretta Lynch in the crosshairs because, as it turns out, Loretta Lynch, under President Obama, allowed this Russian lawyer in to meet with Donald Trump Jr. And it's now come on out, this Russian lawyer, her Moscow office appears to be a shell. She was photographed at anti-Trump rallies. She's very much an anti-Trumper. She did a selfie of herself in McCain's office. She met with a lot of different people, but it's only the Donald Trump story they're still pounding on. And the idea that this impeachment that they're trying is going to go nowhere. I think this is simply trying to destroy Donald Trump's brand in the eyes of the public, and it's not working. Meanwhile, WikiLeaks came out with a story about how Hillary's campaign spokesman was overheard bragging about being able to kill a story that linked the Magnitsky bill, the desire for it to be repealed, with a $500,000 fee for a speech in Moscow by William Jefferson Clinton. Remember when he went to Moscow and he did a speech and got $500,000, and everybody said, ooh, wow, what was that all about? Well, apparently somebody had come up with a link between that and this Magnitsky law And Hillary's people got that story killed. Everyone's talking about Russia promoting Trump and so forth and so on, but it turns out there was a donor to the Clinton Foundation, Viktor Pinchuk, and he is the son-in-law of the former Ukrainian President Kuchma. And it appears he may have been behind the money laundering scheme involving IMF funds intended for Ukraine that were diverted back to the Clinton charity through offshores. In other words, they took IMF money headed for Ukraine to help those poor people, and it wound up in the Clinton Foundation. And the corporate media doesn't want to touch it. It's just not important. All that's important is we get Donald Trump. We control what you think. That's our job, and we're desperate to prove we're still in control of the minds of America, and they're failing miserably here. Now, as you know, a lot of people are putting focus on the Uranium One deal, where Hillary Clinton, while Secretary of State, facilitated and encouraged this deal, which allowed a Russian company to basically take over 20% of America's uranium ore. At the same time, Russian money was pouring into the Clinton Foundation, and everybody's saying this has to be looked at. There's far more evidence of collusion with Russia in that case than anything Donald Trump has said. Well, they're trying to sort of defuse that one because more and more people are asking about it. CNN anchor Alison Camerota basically came on out and declared that, well, there's nothing here because Donald Trump would have approved the same Uranium One deal. Now, there's absolutely no reason to say that that would have happened. And even if Trump had approved the deal, Trump doesn't have this charitable foundation with millions and millions of dollars being poured in by Russian interests. The double standard and the hypocrisy here is just fully on display. We're going to do a quick little shout out to our on-air affiliates who are just now rejoining our network. But it's insane out there. Now, we're getting this other story that just came on in where the New York Times is reporting two political donors of the Democratic Party and a former associate of the electoral staff of Hillary Clinton have now sued the leadership headquarters of Donald Trump. And what they're claiming is the Trump staff intruded into their private life by making a deal with Russia in order to spread, by WikiLeaks, information that was stolen by hackers. And the story doesn't make any sense. Why does Trump need to deal with Russia for WikiLeaks to be releasing those DNC emails, especially since we know they were leaked by Seth Rich? This didn't go through Trump. It didn't go through Russia. And, of course, even the New York Times admits there is no evidence of any of this submitted with the lawsuit. The goal of the lawsuit is to try and start up yet another lawsuit to distract Donald Trump and keep him focused on his own woes and not paying too close attention to what the people around him are doing. And this childish degree of infighting, it makes our government look bad. It makes our country look bad, makes our country look weak. Meanwhile, former chair of the DNC, Debbie Wasserman Schultz, is launching a bid to strip Jared Kushner of his security clearance. Now, this is the lady who left the Democratic servers wide open to hacking and turned down offers of assistance. So again, it's a double standard. You know, we can be reckless with classified information, but you can't. We're going to hold you to account on that. Now, remember, not too long ago, there was a gentleman named Peter Smith who came on out and said that he was launching a project to get together with hackers to hunt down those missing 33,000 deleted Clinton emails, on the theory that because so many people were getting into Hillary Clinton's email server that they're probably out there somewhere. And apparently, he was interviewed by the Wall Street Journal, where he reported on this project, and then all of a sudden, just days later, he commits suicide. And of course, it's the usual, oh, he had sudden downturn in health. No, it was obviously a suicide, and a suicide note that actually said there's no foul play here whatsoever. So there's a lot of wet work going on out there. Okay, let's see. Over in South Syria, it looks like that ceasefire that Putin and Trump agreed to is taking effect, and it's holding so far. And Trump is praising the ceasefire and is now saying he wants to invite Putin for a state visit to the United States. They're all going to be buddy-buddy, and I'm sure all the anti-Russia fanatics in our government are just having cows right now saying, no, we can't let them be friends. It'll just throw a monkey wrench in all of our well-laid plans for nuclear Armageddon here. And moving even further, Trump is saying that they may go ahead and return those Russian diplomatic properties confiscated by Barack Obama to try and smooth over relations with Russia. So obviously from Trump himself, he wants to calm things down and go back to being friends with Russia. The problem is he's surrounded by people who absolutely want the opposite. And they will do anything, emphasis anything, to get their way. They are not loyal to the president. They're not loyal to anybody but themselves and whoever's signing their checks here. Meanwhile, over in Syria, Russia has accused the United States of interfering, preventing any inspections of chemical weapons, suspected attacks in Syria. That when they go on out and say Assad gassed his own people at Idlib, and everybody says, well, let's go look at Idlib, let's go look at the base the chemical weapons supposedly came from, and the U.S. gets in the way. The U.S. prevented the sending of OPCW specialists to Jen Shijun and Al-Sharat Air Base. They just hauled off and went and did it. Now, everybody, of course, understands that Assad gassed his own people at Idlib story was just an absolute fraud from the beginning. Assad had nothing to gain from it. It worked very much against him. The rebels had every motive to stage that and frame Assad. Remember, at the time that was happening, it's obvious Assad is winning Syria back with Russia's help. The international community was getting used to the idea that Assad was going to stay on. And even the Trump White House was saying, yeah, we're prepared to accept that politically. And then all of a sudden, Assad does the one thing that would allow the United States to ramp up the military, ramp up the propaganda, go back to screaming Assad must go. It never made any sense from the beginning. And, of course, I'm not the only person. There's an article over in Sputnik News saying the CIA's solid evidence against Assad evokes memories of Powell's test tube. And if you're not sure what that reference is all about, during the hearings into just how we got into Iraq, or in the run-up to Iraq, Colin Powell made a presentation in which he held up a little stoppered glass tube, and he said, there's enough anthrax in here, could kill everybody in the building. It was probably just talcum powder. And again, when the mess in Iraq was all over, there were no nuclear weapons, there was no sarin, there was no anthrax. It was all a lie to start a war. And this is just more of the same thing. So here is where it gets interesting. There's a story over in Matrix Bob where CIA's Pompeo was asked by Donald Trump, are you absolutely certain of these claims that Assad did this? And Pompeo is taking this high, indignant path. It took my breath away that he would even ask such a question. Which means he didn't really answer the question. The importance of this story, though, is that the CIA assured the president that Assad had launched a chemical weapons attack against his own people. In other words, the CIA lied to Trump just as they did to Kennedy to manipulate him. So we're starting to get a better picture of what's going on in the inner workings of the White House and what's really happening over there. Okay, and it is. Donald Trump is surrounded by people who use Donald Trump to serve their own agendas. They are lying to him in the intelligence estimates. They're feeding him bad information in order to get him to come to decisions that favor their own particular agenda. Get Assad, get China, get Russia, get whoever. And Trump needs to wake up and realize that. Do you remember the stories of King Arthur and Merlin the magician? And of course what we have today is an amalgam of multiple ancient tales that were merged together over time to produce it. But sociologists often look at the character of Merlin as being a tremendous asset to Arthur, not because of the magic tricks he could do, but because Merlin was the one person who could step out of the highest level of the court, go down to the street, talk to people, and then bring that information back to Arthur so that Arthur had an accurate picture of what was going on. Whereas Trump is surrounded by people whose own agendas are best served by keeping him misinformed and deceived. And that's the essence of this story here. It is now coming on out that the claim Assad gassed his own people was being promoted by the CIA, even though the story simply did not make any sense. So there we are. Now, CNN has another embarrassment, and of course this is following on the heels of several CNN reporters having to leave due to their exaggerations, shall we say, breach of ethics, outright lies. And what it is, it turns out CNN has been relying on a group connected with the al-Nusra terrorists to create propaganda, to try and cover tracks, and have tried to cover their tracks after the fact. This is what started coming out last week when one of these filmmakers who made this documentary that was anti-Assad and pro-U.S. intervention it got all the awards. Of course it's going to get the awards. It serves the propaganda. And the filmmaker was a little upset that CNN was trying to pretend that he didn't exist because he himself is linked to Al-Qaeda. So in other words, CNN is actually functioning as the propaganda arm for ISIS and Al-Qaeda, and by extension, the United States. They've been caught again. They're not reporting honest facts. They're out there pushing propaganda to sell you another war. And over at Investment Watch blog, they have another article about CNN's epic fails keep getting worse, and their channel has become almost impossible to distinguish from a Saturday Night Live skit. That's how bad it is over there at CNN. Now, even though Mosul has been declared as liberated, the U.S. commander predicts that there will be weeks more of fighting. They don't want to leave. Just like over in Iraq, they said, well, ISIS is defeated. We're going to have to stick around. And we knew this was going to happen because it was only about a month ago where the U.S. military command announced, well, even if ISIS and Al-Qaeda are driven from Syria, we're going to stick around just in case, just to be sure. What they're trying to do is start to carve out the new Kurdistan, which is still on the agenda. Now, as you know, there have been recent border clashes between India and China, and it's starting to get very, very serious over there now. According to Sputnik News, India's nuclear weapons, which up until recently have been aimed primarily at Pakistan, some are now being sort of shifted around to aim at China. And that is a very alarming situation. We don't know where a nuclear world war is going to pop up. It could be anywhere where these weapons are being used and threatened and deployed. Now, we've been talking about America's poor quality weapons. Very expensive, don't really work all that well. And apparently they have finally discovered the cause of the F-35 engines exploding. They were just exploding. And apparently they're saying if the plane is in a tailwind, it forces hot exhausts into the inlet of the integrated power pack, part of the jet's internal power and cooling system. And that's what's causing these explosions. And it's like, this should have been dealt with at the design phase before you ever went to metal, or composite in this case. I mean, if you look at how expensive this thing is, and it's still growing in cost, some of the things that are wrong with it almost seem like high school errors, shop class errors. We're going to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Now, do you remember Ronald Reagan's Star Wars, the Strategic Defense Initiative, and somebody decided they were going to call it Star Wars after the George Lucas film franchise, which I don't know that he was all that thrilled with. But the idea was they were going to put up this series of satellites, multiple satellites, X-ray weapons, smart rock interceptors, and all the rest of it. And it was there to basically shield us from a Russian nuclear attack, which never happened. And it was hideously expensive. They spent so much money on this project, it turned the United States from a creditor nation to a debtor nation, and actually initiated the decline of our economy. And it ultimately, it didn't work. What they came up with didn't work, especially in the growing arena where nuclear weapons are deliverable by means other than ICBMs, such as cruise missiles. But despite this, the Pentagon is now saying we want to try it again, Star Wars 2.0. They want a huge amount of money to fund space warfare systems. And it's just a huge amount of money, and they didn't make it work last time. And again, more and more of that kind of combat is not going to be fought in space. We shouldn't be fighting in space anyway. We could literally imprison the human race inside a shell of whirling shrapnel. Could take hundreds of years to finally deorbit and be able to launch spacecraft without them getting blasted to bits. But anything for more money. We've got Space Command out there. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Sherry in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, thank you, Mike. I hope I'm being responsible here because there's some things on my mind, kind of pressing on my mind.
Okay.
And you know how things pop into it sometimes. The globalists are losing credibility, and maybe I think they're looking to get back on an anti-Trump war track because Trump's on a roll, and Trump's trips abroad were favorable. Everyone's liking Trump now. I have this warm, fuzzy feeling watching him, you know, shake hands with Putin and all this kind of stuff. And I don't think it's a good time to assassinate him because he's got so many people in favor of what he's doing. But if
that didn't stop them during when John F. Kennedy was assassinated. He was one of the most popular presidents in American history.
This is a good point because that was my one argument because he was really riding high when he got killed. So, but I think, see, Trump, you said Trump isn't going to go to England. So I have some questions here. If he isn't going to go to England and you don't know why, can the Senate initiate a conflict with, let's say, with Russia, that Trump can't stop because it's their position? I mean, Trump can do treaties and talks and keep everything peaceful and nice, but he's done that now. He just came back. So the Senate could initiate another false flag, couldn't they, against Russia or something?
Well, the Senate wouldn't do it. Some third party would do a false flag and say Russia has attacked us or China's attacked us or North Korea's attacked us, and then Congress could issue a declaration of war. But the president still has the right to veto it. Of course.
Oh, he does?
Yeah, well, it's like the declaration of war is like any other bill coming out of Congress. It requires the president's signature to be...
what about just a... Okay, go on, I'm sorry.
You know, to be force of law. But, of course, if there was a false flag and Congress declared war and Trump vetoed it, of course, the corporate media would use that to attack him and call for his impeachment or removal under the 25th Amendment.
Oh, okay. Okay. But, well, now, if it was just a conflict, like they just stirring up, well, like there was this last time with the weapons, it was something that they dragged Trump into because he wasn't smart enough to know, or he was misinformed. And could they do something like that again? And it wouldn't last long because something's coming up this winter. You know, this is let's see, this is the year of our discontent. This is the winter of our discontent. What's that from?
Richard III.
What is that? Richard III.
Yeah, stay on the line.
Okay.
I'm going to stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after these few words.
Okay.
Hi, America. Welcome back to the show here. We're still talking with Sherry in Texas. And again, looking back at history, it is very clear that those who desire war can and will and have done anything it takes to get that war. Assassinate Archduke Ferdinand. Load up the Lusitania with smuggled weapons and send it into an area where they knew the German U-boats were going to be looking for it. Blaming a coal bunker fire on the USS Maine on a Spanish mine. Torpedoes in the Gulf of Tonkin. Ooh, Saddam has nuclear weapons. And so forth and so on. Every ruler in history who has wanted to start a war has to lie and trick his people into it. Otherwise, they're not going to go. They're not going to go. War is a very dangerous, dirty, very poorly paying business. You have to leave your family far, far behind, and there's a good possibility you're going to lose important bits of your body along the way. Who would want to go and do that just to make the boss fellow a little richer than he already is? And that's
well,
why...
I'm looking... Excuse me.
No, go ahead.
I'm looking specifically at an aggression that would force Russia to attack us because they have to. In other words, it would be an aggressive act by the United States, like an invasion of attack, that Russia would have to respond to. And I don't think it would go very long because there's going to be something this winter, and it's weird. I know this is weird, but I was thinking it's going to be very cold. We're going to have so many problems here at home. We're going to need our fighting forces here, actually, to dig us out and to keep us safe. And I was thinking the word aphelion. Now, I didn't know what aphelia. I didn't know what that meant. So I looked that up, and it was the point in which here, it just came on off my computer. Whether my iBook is still going. It's the point in the orbit of a planet, an asteroid or comet, at which it is the farthest from the sun. Now, that would mean it's going to be cold, right?
Yeah, that would be aphelion.
Is that how you pronounce it? It has an F here, but aphelion or apophilia.
Okay.
Yeah, and so I thought, okay, so we're going to have a really cold winter, and that could maybe put a halt on any aggression. But I think we might, it makes sense if he's done all his treatying and shaking of hands now. It's kind of the only thing left for the globalists to do is to start something that's going to turn the people against Trump and get them back on their war track. And also, I want to throw in, while I can think of it, I looked up on my dictionary here, behind the eight ball, and it means at a disadvantage.
Yes.
The phrase itself has a meaning. So this is what I say stands for Hillary. She's at a disadvantage. I don't think she's going to do anything. She can posture all she wants to make herself look like she's still viable, but I don't think it's going to happen. But I am worried about this business of he's not going to England. That was more of the let's get together and talk, and this is a very good thing, and now he's not going, and you don't know why?
Well, he's delayed. He's delayed, and no, nobody is saying why that is. It may be tangled up with the whole Brexit situation, and Donald Trump understands if he goes to Great Britain, it's going to strain relations with Brussels, and so that could be part of it. We don't actually know, but I would say that that's the most likely scenario. Well,
okay. Get your preppy people, get your supplies in case we have a hard winter. And I hope, I don't know what it means, but I like to put these things out there. And thank you so much, Mike, for letting me say all that.
All right.
We'll see.
All right.
Okay.
Thanks an awful lot, Sherry. We're going to let you go here. And I'm expecting this winter will be a little harsher than the ones we've already been through. And they can be very difficult. But again, when a government goes to war, very often they will allow their population back home to suffer hardship in order to keep everything going toward the war effort. And especially when you're fighting in a cold climate. That was why butter was so important, to keep that fat content up to help them deal with the cold over there in Europe. And by the way, a lot of people don't realize this. Margarine, the butter replacement, was actually invented as a wartime commodity because all the real butter had to be sent to the front line. And so they invented this concoction called margarine. And after the war was over, they said, well, this is kind of cool. We'll keep it around. Same thing with Spam. Spam is a wartime ration. Very popular here in Hawaii, by the way. All right, we're going to go to Mike in Alaska. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Mike, I think Tucker Carlson is a national treasure. I think he is doing the most out of anyone that's still in that legacy MSM complex. He really tore those two guys up in these last couple days as far as the neocon agenda goes.
Good.
And I wanted to comment on the Lindbergh comment that one of the guests made towards Tucker, and that was that I think Charles Lindbergh was a Nazi sympathizer and basically just a bad person, blah, blah, blah.
Now
And,
you're talking about Charles Lindbergh when he went into politics. You're talking about his father, who was a politician.
Well, the way I understand it is the dad was real important with the Federal Reserve Act. He's one of the few that stood up against the banking establishment.
Yes.
When he was a representative or senator, and the son was the aviator. Is that correct?
Yes, but the son also went into politics later in life.
Yeah, and so the guest on the show, I don't believe he was talking about the father. I believe he was talking about I think it was America First, or the son going into politics and then just wanting us to not get involved in the Second World War.
Yeah, that was definitely true. That was definitely true. And yeah, he was a nationalist. He was an isolationist, and he was hardly alone in that. When we were on the verge of World War II, most of the people alive had clear memories of World War I. It wasn't that long between the two of them, and of course, Roosevelt's task was, how are we going to turn that around? How are we going to take a nation of people who thinks Europe's wars are Europe's problems and Asia's wars are Asia's problem, and get them to say, yes, we have to go on out and do something? And that's when he began that program to goad Japan into attacking Pearl Harbor, which then became his doorway into the larger war against the Nazis.
And the what you just said there with Europe's wars are Europe's wars, that position more closely matches what most of the founding fathers said as well.
Yes.
So it's amazing how that non-interventionism of the Lindberghs, of both of them actually, turns into, in 2017, a guest on a show saying they were, Nazi sympathizers and on and on and on. And Mike, that's on my bucket list. I couldn't handle that road to Hana, but he's buried out there. Is that correct?
That's correct, and I have visited his gravesite. It's a very beautiful little place. It's a little congregational church. After that whole thing about the kidnapping of the Lindbergh baby, the Lindberghs withdrew from private life, and at that time, Hana was probably about as remote a place you could find on planet Earth. Still is. To a lesser extent, and they lived out the rest of their life there. Getting on back to this idea about if you're not ready to go to war against the Nazis, you must be sympathizing them. That's that kind of absolutist idea that we heard from like George W. Bush. Either you're with us or you're with the terrorists. And this idea that if you're not ready to make war on the Russians, you must be a Russian stooge. And we're starting to hear that more and more.
And it's selectively applied, Mike, because if you're a Koch brother, or you're helping setting up factories in the Soviet Union, or you're IBM in Germany, that doesn't count.
No, that doesn't count. That's just making money.
So, thanks, Mike.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over to Mark in North Carolina. Aloha, Mark. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. I had stopped watching Fox almost completely, but I think I'm going to start watching Tucker and maybe Sean Hannity now. Again, because I heard about what happened. Tucker Carlson was being interviewed earlier by, Laura Ingraham. Okay.
Yeah.
And that's the first I heard about that thing he had with the so-called colonel there, Ralph Peters. A little nerd. It's hard to believe he's ever in the Army. Period. And evidently this nerd made that comment about Lindbergh, which kind of almost called as if Lindbergh was a traitor, which he was not, and calling Tucker either a traitor, a coward, or whatever other, or an isolationist. Like, I don't see anything wrong being an isolationist anyway. But, and unfortunately, people don't realize, you kind of hit it before, about what happened before World War II. World War I, in the 1 year the United States was involved in it, cost us 120,000 dead in just 1 year.
Yes.
And I'm not even sure how many wounded. And we had no business in that war. It was none of our business in Europe. Germany was no threat to us, but they would, neither was England. I mean, they would basically, this was a European matter. Why they fought it, I have no clue either.
Oh, well, actually, if you go read All Wars or Bankers' Wars, you will find out, because World War I actually began between Austria-Hungary and Serbia. triggered by the assassination of Archduke Ferdinand. But it was quickly mutated. It was quickly mutated into this is a war against Germany, because Germany back then had become this manufacturing powerhouse. They were selling products, and they were a serious economic threat to Great Britain and to the United States. In terms of selling exports into the available markets of the time, and that was the reason they wanted to smash Germany to leave the rest of the world for Great Britain and the United States. In fact, during the 1930s, when they were starting to make the motions toward World War II, Winston Churchill was doing regular radio broadcasts in Great Britain, saying we can't allow Germany to become this manufacturing power again. And when the Nazis came on in and kicked out the private central bank imposed on them by the Treaty of Versailles and went to a value-based currency, of course their economy took off. They called it the German miracle. Because nations that are not enslaved to a private central bank that is just helping themselves to the bulk of the GDP, they're always going to do a lot better than nations that are enslaved to private central banks. And so once again, they started creating a situation where they were going to goad Germany into doing something stupid and get another war going. And then, of course, it spread across the entire globe.
And the people in this country at the time didn't want to get involved in another European war. We wanted to be left alone. We, didn't want any of that nonsense. And it kind of reminds me of what's going on with Russia now. They're trying to say, "Oh, Russia's a bad guy. Russia's this.
Yes.
Russia's that." I get so angry at people when they say, some of these clowns, these neocons, they keep and these fools on the news media. They say matter of factly. They don't even say maybe, could be, or anything else. Just like Assad. Assad is a gasses his own people, is brutal dictator, this and that. There's no if he may be, but to Tucker Carlson's credit, he said he doesn't. Not only that, he also said about Iran. He says, you know what? It's not the Shiites committing terror all over the world and bombing places and all that around the world. Okay, as far as I know, those aren't Shiites. He knows they're Sunni Wahhabis.
Yes.
And Peters got all bent out. Evidently, Peters, I wish I'd have seen that, because evidently Peters got all bent out of shape out of that. And I wonder if Fox is going to keep him on. I think if they cut him, they're in trouble anyway, Fox. So if they cut this guy, if they cut Tucker out, they may go downhill even faster than CNN is going now.
Well, because, it does seem to be a multi-way tie in a race to the bottom of the heap, and they're all in serious trouble. They're all in serious trouble, and they're appealing to the government to shut down the independent media. We're unfair competition, and we're cheating because we're using the truth, when their job is to control what the American people are thinking. In fact, they're starting to talk about they want government subsidies, the way the BBC operates. Where the corporate media is funded by taxpayer dollars or a license fee or whatever else is out there. But yeah, they're in trouble. People are not watching them. The polls are showing trust in the corporate media is at an all-time record low.
That Tucker's the only one, as far as I know, on mainstream media that had the gall to come on Alex Jones' InfoWars, not once but twice, including one time at his Austin studio. Now, he hasn't done that since he's become a regular in Fox News. This was when he was on, a couple of shows here and there and stuff. But I'd like to see him do that now. Not only, I like to see him have a guy like you on. I wish he'd have somebody like you. I wish a lot of these people would.
He knows where to find me.
Some of the alternate media. Huh?
He knows where to find me.
Yeah, have you on, maybe a guy like... his name Gerald Salente,
yes, or Ray McGovern.
What's it? Ray McGovern.
Paul Craig
McGovern or Paul Craig Roberts.
Yes, that was the name I was reaching for.
Yeah, that would be awesome to have people like you on. And if anybody has the guts to do it, I think it's him. And let's hope he does, Well,
let's hope he's got a really ironclad contract with Fox, because even Fox is starting to show signs of being co-opted and driven back over to the war agenda.
Oh, yeah, I was at the gym earlier, and they were, on the, I noticed on the tickers there, I wasn't, I couldn't actually hear it because I didn't have my wire on. But I saw on their on the captions there, they're starting this nonsense about Russia. They were drumming away at this still about this nonsense with Russia and all that, and who Trump met with and whatever else. But it seems like there's some, like Tucker and Sean Hannity, I guess Lou. I got to start watching Lou Dobbs some more again too when I get a chance. They're still basically pretty much with it. Dobbs is another one he should have alternate media on because he, for all intents and purposes, for a while was alternate media himself.
Yep.
I like to see a lot. I see a lot of these people on. And to Laura Ingram's credit, recently I think she had Roger Stone on as a guest.
Yeah.
A few weeks ago.
Yeah.
So she's getting there. She's getting a little bit more alternate media. So maybe even talk radio. Maybe even these people in talk radio understand if they're going to survive, they've got to get away from the neocons and all the. Meanwhile, the Breitbart is going the other way. They're becoming more and more.
Yeah. Especially after Bannon left.
Yeah, after Bannon left. The only one that's any good is this guy Raheem Hassam, and I think they're cutting him out now. He's I turn it on sometimes in the morning if I'm if they start the vehicle up, car up, and if he's not on, I got one of those two other clowns on, but whether it's Boyle or Marlowe, I just turn it off. I just turn it down. Something, music. I just listen to my music.
Okay. Well, speaking of music, we have to take a break. We have to take a break for commercials.
Okay, you take it to you.
Mark, thank you for the phone call. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. Now, there's an interesting story that's circulating around the net, and I'm trying to find some confirmation for it. But basically, it goes like this. There's a retired CIA agent, Malcolm Howard, and apparently he is very, very ill, and his doctors have told him he only has a few weeks left to live. And apparently Malcolm Howard is making, for all intents and purposes, a deathbed confession that he, as an operative of the CIA, was involved in the bringing down of World Trade Center Building Number 7, using nanothermite and various other materials to collapse it in on itself. So we'll see. It's a confirmation of what we think we know elsewhere. And I'm looking, again, for more confirmation about this specific story. Let's go back to the phones. Al in Canada, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Mike. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Excellent. Earlier you were talking about the corporate media in the United States wanting, a handout, government-funded welfare, if that's what you want to call it. Up here in Canada, we have the CBC, and it's about $1 billion a year, $30 per person that lives in this country. And let me just say, and you probably already know, here's a couple of headlines. Trump to Macron's wife, you're in such good shape, a smear job.
Yep.
As Canadian troops arrive at Latvia, the battle for support lands at home, Russian propaganda crapola.
Mm-hmm.
Trudeau urges governors to stand with Canada on trade, governors of the United States. And another Russian story, Russian lobbyists was at Trump Tower meeting where Clinton dirt was promised. Mike, it's one thing to be force-fed propaganda by independently owned corporate media. It's another thing to know that you're actually paying to be fed this nonsense. Yeah, I'm not saying everything on the CBC is propaganda, but a lot of it is. Just like CNN and some of the other stuff that these independent media stations put out.
Well,
how would you feel?
Any time the funding for media is coming through the hands of the government is going to use that to basically influence, what that media is doing. And Goebbels was hardly alone in his assertion that the state has a right to determine what the population is thinking.
I like the word you used, influence. It's very subtle. You and I both know it's a little stronger than influence. I mean, look at the BBC. My good God. And the CBC up here, sometimes it's just so ridiculous. And every single Trump smear story They're allowed comments on every single one, but over 90% of the stories about our own leader up in this country, you can't comment on it. And, I mean, you would expect something like that, wouldn't you, Mike?
Yeah, in this day and age, I definitely would. Anyway, Al, going to let you go. Got to do a station identification.
Thank you.
Back with hour number 2 after these few words. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 2. Phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. Let's talk about the economic news a little bit. Again, it's been a really good day. Happy Friday on the stock market. But again, those numbers are no more meaningful to the real economy than the official government unemployment rate, the official U.S. government rate for inflation, so forth and so on. Now, the Federal Reserve and the European Central Bank have been keeping the equities markets going with what we can call collectively quantitative easing. It's been a bunch of different names. Troubled Asset Relief Program, Quantitative Easing 1, QE2, QE3, QE5, QE Infinity, various other programs like that. The net result is there's a huge amount of created out of nothing money floating around out there in the equities markets. And it's why Wall Street is doing so well. It's all that free money floating around here. Well, the Federal Reserve and the ECB understand they have to start winding that back. They have to start pulling that back down. They have to start tapering off on all of this instantly created money. The question is, do they really think they can do that without triggering a market downturn? And the answer is going to be no, because when you manipulate the market higher, you're also overvaluing it. The worth of the underlying stock is not increased with the stock price. And so when you pull out that artificial support of all kinds of money pouring on in, the price of the stock is going to sink back down to the value of the underlying stock itself, which is tied in with obviously the profitability of the company that is traded publicly, the dividends that it is paying, and the more overvalued the market is, the further that drop is going to be. And right now, at least the American stock market is more overvalued than it was in 1929. So the Fed and the ECB are out there saying we have to start pulling back on some of this instantly created money, but we can do it without bringing the market down. I don't see exactly how they think that's going to work. And remember, in an overvalued market, the first ones to get out will get their money. And then everything's going to come on down, and the last ones out of the market, meaning ordinary American investors who don't have access to the inside information, they're going to be left with a brokerage report with a very impressive-looking number on the bottom of it, and that's about all they're going to be left with here. Now, over at the COMEX, the CEO, interviewed on Fox Business News, is saying gold should probably be between $5,000 and $6,000 an ounce under current conditions. And the fact that it obviously isn't is another reminder this is being manipulated to the benefit of the money junkies. The money junkies want to keep the price of metals down so that you will not empty your negative interest rate savings account to get into metals. They don't want you selling off your stocks. And, of course, for those banks that were playing fast and loose with other people's gold, they want to be able to buy and replace that gold at the lowest price possible. So this is all being done for their benefit, not for yours. Meanwhile, the retail Mageddon continues to go on, and Jim Marie is scaling back. We talked about them just this last week going into bankruptcy. Payless has gone into Chapter 11 bankruptcy. And Radio Shack, at one point, had 7,300 stores, and it has only 70 stores operating today. And that is really a shame, because I liked Radio Shack when it really was a store for the electronic hobbyists. JCPenney is shutting down 140 of its department stores it is the middle of the year. They're offering 6,000 employees early retirement. Macy's is going to close another 68 of their locations, including one of their oldest stores in Minneapolis that opened in 1902. They're going to be letting 3,900 people go. Sears and Kmart, which is actually one company now, Sears Holding Corporation, shutting down 42 of its Sears stores. And then in May, it added a dozen more. In June, another 20. And in July, 8 more. And apparently, in a March 21st filing with regulators, Sears warned that there's substantial doubt about the company's ability to continue. The Limited, women's clothing retailer, is shutting all 250 of their stores. Abercrombie and Fitch, which was doing really well in the 1990s, early 2000s, they're shutting down 60 of their U.S. stores in 2017 as the leases start to expire. We're going to do a quick little shout out to our on-air affiliates just now rejoining our network. We're talking about all the retailers who are going out of business because their customers no longer have the money to go into those stores and buy things. Michael Kors, luxury fashion brands, closing 125 of their 800 stores. Guess is closing all 60 of their stores by the end of the year. As of this last April, they were running 950 stores worldwide. They're closing 60 of their stores by the end of the year. American Apparel filed for bankruptcy. H.H. Gregg filed for bankruptcy. BCBG filed for Chapter 11. CVS, which is this huge company, they not too long ago, they were buying out other stores. Apparently, they're going to close 70 stores this year. Now, they've got 9,600, so it's not a lot of stores, but still, it's an indicator things are tightening up out there. The Children's Place, a clothing chain for kids, they're going to close approximately 200 of their stores this year. Wet Seal has just closed its remaining 171 stores. Rue 21 starting to close some 400 stores out of 1,200. BB closed all 178 of their stores. Now, here's what's going on. They're trying to blame it on online sales. And, yes, some online retailers are doing very well, like Amazon. In fact, now there's even talk of breaking up Amazon because it's too big. But retail is all about instant gratification. I go into a store, I look at the product, I pick it up, I hold it, I see how well it's made, and I say, I want this. And I give the clerk my money, they give me what I want to buy, and we both go home happy. That's it. This idea that we're all comfortable ordering online, not so much, especially here in Hawaii. It can take weeks for what you've ordered to get here, which can be a problem if you had to order a spare part for your computer, because you're going to be offline for all that time. And the reality is sometimes you will get burned with online ordering. It looks great on the website, looks great in the photos, and then it shows up and you realize it's absolutely terrible. And that actually happened to Claire just recently when she ordered a clothing item online, and it was a tremendous disappointment. The problem here is the wealth differential, the wealth inequality. When you have all the money sucked up to the very top of the pyramid, and there's no way for any of it to get back down to the middle and working classes as decent wages and salaries, then the economy is going to lock up. Nobody has the money to go into those shopping malls anymore. We're seeing malls here on Oahu start to lose their anchor tenants, you know, the big stores at the end that draw people in. This mall we've got down here at the bottom of the hill, huge number of vacancies, especially since this last terrible Christmas season. You can't scream that we need to keep wages and salaries low and then wonder why nobody's walking into your store to buy your products. It's very obvious what's going on. If you are in the business of making money off of ordinary people, You have to create an economic environment where those ordinary people are able to trade their labor and their skills for enough money to not only take care of themselves, but to go into the malls and buy whatever it is you're selling. It really is very simple to understand. What's going on here is we're in a wartime economy. They don't want to admit it, but we are. The idea is that ordinary people are being allowed to keep just enough money to stay alive, and everything else is sucked out for that war machine. I was mentioning just yesterday, we're a nation that says we can't afford universal basic health care, but we can always come up with another $500 billion for weapons. Now, Visa is escalating its war on cash to U.S. retailers. They have a new initiative, and this is aimed at small businesses, restaurants, cafes, food truck owners, and the like. And what they are doing, Visa is offering all of these customers $10,000 if they commit to refusing cash payments and only accept the Visa debit or credit card. And I'm going to tell you something right now. I will not do business with anybody who refuses cash. And remember, on the front of that pretty printed piece of paper, it says, this note is legal tender for all debts, public and private. Visa's trying to get around that. And we know why the bankers want a cashless society, so all the wealth is under their control. It's to protect themselves from a run on the bank. It's to keep us dependent on them. And dependency is slavery. So, I will not do business with any store that refuses to accept cash. And there are a couple of businesses Claire and I used to do business with that went that way. Oh, we're not going to take cash anymore. All right, sorry, it was nice knowing you. Nor are we going to be using our Visa cards. It's time for the American people to stand up and resist being corralled into the banker's paradise. Because the banker's paradise is going to be hell on earth for the rest of us. And again, go on back and read the writings of Charles Dickens and the squalor and poverty and crime that was in England of those days. And that was all a direct result of the Bank of England issuing all of the British currency as a loan at interest. And then King George III enforced that same system on the American colonies. And in the matter of just a couple of years, they went from colonies where nobody was out of work to the same kind of poverty and desperation as Great Britain at the same time. And that's where they're herding us into right now. Now, out in California, fiscal watchdogs are bracing for the nation's largest state-run pension fund to go bust. We're starting to see these things run out of money all across the country. And, of course, the politicians are wringing these hands. Oh, these old people, they're living too long. They demand too much. They're just being greedy. No, they're not. It's their money, remember? And the contribution to the pension fund by the employer is a promise the employer made and should be kept to. And we know why all these pensions are in trouble. Back in 2008, during the mortgage-backed security fraud, Wall Street's pet rating agencies rated these bundles AAA, which made it legal for pension funds to invest in them. And then it turned out they were fraudulent, they were bogus, they were worthless. The bottom fell on out, and all of a sudden the pensions were defunded because they'd invested their money in these mortgage-backed securities, and all of a sudden it was gone. And it's gone. And nobody in our culture has the courage to stand up and point the finger of blame where it rightly deserves to go, which is the money junkies. And we need to understand these are very sick people. And there's a good example here. This is being reported over in the Daily Mail. Jordan Lupu, 42 years old, investment banker. He's an executive at a $1 billion investment bank. He lives in a $3 million home, owns a second $1.4 million house in Westchester. was arrested for shoplifting at the Tribeca Whole Foods in Lower Manhattan. Tried to sneak $200 worth of groceries out of the store in his children's stroller. That's classic money junkie behavior. Same thing with Bernie Madoff. The man was incredibly rich, co-founder of NASDAQ, but it was not enough. He had to have more. He had to cheat his investors. Money's a good thing. Wealth is a good thing. I'd love to be wealthy. I'd have a lot of fun. But we're talking about a class of people who are literally addicted to that thrill that they get when a big chunk of money comes on in. And getting on back to that documentary, Inside Job, they talked about how researchers wired up Wall Street traders' brains with these scanners. And they discovered that when the trader hit a good score, did a really good deal, made a quick profit, the part of the brain that lit up was exactly the same part of the brain that lights up when you do cocaine. And by the way, if you go back and look at Wolf of Wall Street, you understand there's a lot of cocaine use on Wall Street. It's addictive behavior. And most people don't realize it because when you think of an addict, you think of somebody who's spent all their money on heroin or crack or whatever else it is, and they're dressed in shabby clothes and rags, and they're living in an apartment with no furniture left. But the money junkies, they look exactly the opposite. They look good. Expensive Armani suits, $100,000 wristwatches, supercars. Everybody says, ooh, I want to live like that. Then you look at people like Bernie Madoff and realize that for all their wealth, they're still not happy. Because addicts can never satisfy their addiction. Nobody doing meth or doing heroin ever reached a point where they said, I've had enough for today. I'm going to quit for a while. Doesn't work that way. All right, back to the phones. Kathleen in Paris, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hi, Michael. About what you're talking about there of the pension funds not having enough money to pay the people who have worked. Well, one time I heard somebody talking about the bankers getting these humongous bonuses, and how can you square these bankers getting these humongous bonuses when the rest of the people are poor? And the answer was, but it was in their contract. We have to honor their contract, the sanctity of the contract and like that. Well, what about these people? Didn't they have a contract with the pensioners, the retirees, the teachers, the firemen, and now their pension's gone? Didn't they have some kind of a contract? Yeah,
they did. That pension agreement is a contract. But you're absolutely right when, again, in the aftermath of the 2008 meltdown and all this taxpayer money was being poured onto these banks. I mean, that was all that a bailout really was, was taking $1 trillion from the American people and giving it to the bankers so the bankers could loan it back to the American people at interest. But what wound up happening is these bankers started putting much of that money in their own pocket as these outrageous bonuses. And Congress just sat there and did absolutely nothing. I mean, a few of them wagged their finger and said, that doesn't look very good. But again, giving all this money to Wall Street was like handing the keys to the local pharmacy to a heroin addict. You're not going to get a good result.
I love how you wag your finger. It was really funny.
Okay. Anything else?
No.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Have a good weekend. We're going to let you go. Now, interestingly enough, the House Appropriations Committee last Tuesday released a bill that does allocate $1.6 billion to begin construction of a physical barrier along the U.S. border with Mexico. Oh, we got to take a break for commercials. We'll be right back. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're talking about this House Appropriations Committee Tuesday put out a bill allocating $1.6 billion to begin construction of a physical barrier along the U.S. border with Mexico. And that, of course, was one of Donald Trump's central campaign promises. And I'm glad that he's keeping his campaign promise. I don't know that a wall is really all that necessary. I keep thinking crocodiles in the Rio Grande are going to be a lot cheaper. But all jokes aside, the way you stop illegal immigration is you cut off the incentive for them to walk across that border in the first place. If you enforce the existing laws so that they can't get jobs, can't get a place to live, can't get free stuff, they won't come here. It's that simple. All right, we're going to take a phone call. Tony in Puerto Rico, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yeah, hello, aloha, Mike. Yeah, Mike, I just want to make a quick comment. Why, after when JFK was murdered, why didn't Robert Kennedy became more aggressive and go after the real killers?
Well, he couldn't, because as soon as Johnson took over as president, Johnson got himself a new attorney general, and Robert Kennedy became a private citizen. One of the reasons that they think Robert Kennedy was assassinated was that had he won the White House, he would have had the authority and the means to start digging into John F. Kennedy's death.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Mike.
All right. Thanks an awful lot. We're going to let you go. And, of course, the same fear was reborn when Ted Kennedy started talking about running for the White House. And that incident at Chappaquiddick may have been actually an attempt at an assassination. But because of the scandal involving Mary Jo Kopechne, Ted Kennedy's White House ambitions ended pretty much at that point. Getting on back to immigration, and this is what I'm talking about, enforcement here. Border Patrol agents bust sex offenders re-entering Texas. Remember what I said about migration being a filtering process. We're not getting the best people. So apparently the agents arrested an illegal alien fugitive wanted for negligent manslaughter, a sex offender wanted on a drug charge, a foreign national wanted for abuse of a child, torture, and rape, and another foreign national wanted for sexual assault. And along with cutting off all possible economic incentives for them to come here, we should have very strict punishments for those who do. In fact, we should probably have reciprocity with the immigration law in Mexico. You can't just walk into Mexico, get a job, get free stuff. You walk into Mexico without the permission of the Mexican government, you're going to go to jail for a very, very long time. I don't think we really need a wall. We just need to enforce the law. We need to get rid of all of these mayors and governors who think that their desire for a new world order allows them to be above the law, because they're not. Germany is expecting at least 300,000 more Syrian and Iraq Muslim invaders this year. Many are arriving on forged passports. This is turning into a racket, big business. Now, here in the United States of America, the Department of Homeland Security is outlining a program for mandatory biometric ID at airports for foreign travel. Now, it makes sense that people coming into this country need to be identified to make sure they're not a terrorist, but the Department of Homeland Security is asking for a huge new budget increase because they want biometric ID for people who are leaving the United States. And I think that's really what it's all about, justifying a larger budget here, because the Department of Homeland Security is part of the security industrial complex. See, Eisenhower was right to warn us about the military-industrial complex, but he fell short in not recognizing other sectors of the economy could develop the same way, like the medical-industrial complex, the security-industrial complex. All right, we're going to take another break for commercials. We'll be right back. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And Jamie Dimon has a comment that I think a lot of people can identify with. He says, being an American visiting other countries, it's almost an embarrassment. And I can understand that. I experienced a little something like that many years ago when I was working on a project in Germany. because one of the people I was working with, we took a weekend off, and we went out to Heron Kimse and various other places, and we ran across some tourists from Texas, and it was a little embarrassing being there. But I think it's much worse now, because the people of the world are looking at the behavior of our government and realizing that the United States is not the nation they thought it was. It's not the nation that CNN claims it is. It's not the nation portrayed in the movies and TV shows. In my lifetime, I have never seen such childish behavior by our so-called leaders as I am seeing right now. And I'm wondering, were they really always that way, and we just didn't see it because we didn't have an independent media? Are they all juiced up on prescription antidepressants? Are they heavy metals in the tap water in Washington, D.C.? Because I have to tell you in all honesty, looking at their behavior, some of the goofs that Maxine Waters and Nancy Pelosi keep making over and over again, they don't seem to be thinking very clearly. And it's one thing to have mentally incompetent people in a nice little safe home with rubber walls and basket weaving and all the rest of it. But among the people who have the authority to send our kids off to fight a war, that strikes me as being dangerous and inappropriate. Now then, getting on to the area of political correctness, and it really has reached a point of ridiculousness, which is only going to hasten its downfall. Very weird story coming on out of government slaves. Over at Rutgers University, there's a professor, Carrie Mott, and she's teamed up with University of Waterloo professor Daniel Cockayne, and they have written an academic journal article saying that scholars who are doing any research right now should avoid citing any white men. Anybody who's a scientist who's a white man, don't quote them, don't do anything, because we want to carry forward with our vision of feminist equality. Well, you don't achieve equality by being deliberately unequal. You don't reverse racism by being racist. You don't end discrimination by being discrimination. That's exactly what they're doing. They want to go on out and rewrite the history of science to favor their own, whatever their group is. And that's dishonest. But it shows that we really have reached a bread and circuses mentality in this country. If the mob screams loud enough, we will give them what they want, no matter how ridiculous. Speaking of ridiculous, you've probably heard of the Susan G. Komen Foundation for the Cure. And there's been a lot of questions about just how legit they are, how much money they're actually spending for the cure versus how much of the donations made to them or the money they make off of all these pink products that they're selling is absorbed by salaries and administrative costs. But apparently the Susan G. Komen Foundation has now decided to file lawsuits against hundreds of small cancer charities for using the word cure. Now, that is highly questionable. I think if any of these went to trial, the judge is going to say, no, you can't trademark the word cure. This may be law mail. We're going to sue you for using the word cure unless you agree to an out-of-court settlement. But this idea that you can trademark the word cure, I don't think so. Now then, as you know, in this whole brouhaha over human-caused global warming, there's always the question about alternative sources of energy, and there have been some very bad botch-ups over the last several years involving wind farms and solar panels. And a lot of people keep saying solar is good, solar is good. Once you've paid for the solar panels, the energy is basically free. Well, not exactly. You still have to maintain the solar panels. The efficiency still really isn't there. There have been some tantalizing developments on ways to maximize the output from the solar cells. But as it turns out, there is another issue. And that is the materials used in the solar panels and the waste products left behind are loaded with heavy metals, toxic heavy metals, and the pro-nuclear group Environmental Progress has come out with a report saying solar panels produce 300 times more waste than nuclear power plants for every single unit of electricity produced. Now, obviously, it is a pro-nuclear group, and there is a difference you need to keep in mind. The waste products put out by the manufacturer of solar cells may be toxic and heavy metal, but they're not radioactive. And some of those materials can be recycled, unlike nuclear waste. But there's been a tremendous degree of recklessness in all of these industries. As long as the government's going to look the other way, yeah, we can dump our toxic waste wherever we want. Pump it down to the fracking wells, leave it out at Hanford, just dump it into the ocean. Now, here's a bizarre article. This is literally the United Nations has come out with a statement that educated people threaten sustainability. And this is a quote from UNESCO's website. Generally, more highly educated people who have higher incomes consume more resources than poorly educated people who tend to have lower incomes. I'm sorry, this is badly quoted. Explains the UN toolkit. In this case, more education increases the threat to sustainability. I don't think that's really the issue. I think the issue is that the United Nations and the globalists are frustrated by the fact that every one of their little plans and arguments and plots they put forward are taken apart by people who are educated, who are able to think and analyze, just as we've done with the human-caused global warming nonsense. Educated people are harder to fool and manipulate. And that's why we're always talking about the dumbing down of America, Common Core, and the rest of it. Now, we talk about all the wet work that's going on surrounding politics, and there's a lot of it surrounding environmentalism. According to this article that came out from Oraz.com, 200 environmentalists were murdered last year. They were engaged in trying to protect the land, water, and wildlife in their communities. This includes 5 park rangers in Africa's Virunga National Park, which is home to some of the world's last remaining mountain gorillas. And these murders are rarely prosecuted. They can't find who's really doing it. But mostly it's being done by the poachers, because there is still a healthy black market for animal parts, under primitive belief that certain portions of animals will help cure certain illnesses. Rhino horn is still incredibly popular. Supposedly it improves your sex life. It doesn't actually, but that's where it's coming from. And so the poaching has moved into the area of organized crime, and organized crime just kills the people who get in their way. Now, here's a very exciting little development. And this is getting into quantum mechanics, which is a very bizarre universe. And there's a phenomenon called quantum entanglement, where if you have 2 quanta that are created at exactly the same moment, exactly the same location, they are now entangled. And what happens to one will happen to the other, even if they are separated by a very long distance. And Chinese scientists have just achieved quantum entanglement communication from a pair of photons that were 870 miles apart. It's one of the weird things about quantum mechanics. I would like to know just how rapidly that change propagated. Are we looking at something that can actually communicate past the speed of light? It's interesting stuff out there. Okay, let's back on up to some of the economic news. Credit card debt is rocketing to record highs. $1 trillion expected by the end of the year. And the problem there is more and more people, as prices go up and wages and salaries are going down, they're being forced to rely on their credit card for just basic living expenses, food, feed the family. And in their mind, it's an emergency temporary measure. I know I'm going to get a higher paying job in another month and I can pay this all back. But no, it doesn't happen. And people are just being entrapped by all this debt, more and more of it. Apparently, one of the largest debt collection agencies in the country, Collectly, has raised $1.9 million to move their debt collection online. So we're going to have websites to make it easier to go on out and harass all these people who are on debt. And again, as the rates go up at the Federal Reserve, the rates on your credit cards are going to go up with it. And once again, right now especially, with all these economists shouting these warnings about an imminent financial meltdown, you should be doing everything you can possible to pay off those credit cards right now and be as debt-free as possible before things really go bad. See, another story, this one from Investment Watch blog, financial crisis of historic proportions bearing down on us. Yeah, we know about that one here. It's all about that private central bank. It's all about that private central bank. It is a scam. It is a racket. And it works only because politicians will gladly sell out their ethics and principles for enough money. And if you're a bank and you're in the business of just making the money, then you've got all you need to buy a government out from under its own people, which is exactly what happened a little over 100 years ago in this country, when a corrupted Congress and a corrupted president abandoned the constitutional authority to create and issue money and turned it over to a privately owned bank. And that in and of itself was unconstitutional, because the Constitution does not authorize the government to delegate the money creation authority to a third party. And if you look at the wealth inequality since that time to this, you'll see that it's definitely, there's a correlation there. We're living under a very dishonest monetary system, and it works very well for the bankers, and it's designed to permanently trap the people in the nation in unpayable debt to make us the bankers' slaves. That's what the private central banks are about. They're not about money. It's just ink and paper or numbers in a computer. They know it's all worthless. It's about convincing you that you have an obligation to the bankers to make you their slaves. And it's obviously a very subtle form of slavery, but it's still real. And that's what they're in the business of doing it. There was a movie out a while back called The International, loosely based on the BCCI scandal. And they were talking about discovering that this bank was getting involved in investing in small arms companies. And the investigators are talking to the head of a bank and saying, why does this bank want to get in to control the conflict? And the banker says they're not going in to control the conflict. Their goal is to control the debt the conflict produces. Because that's the real value of any conflict, is the debt it creates for the warring parties that's owned by the bank. As long as we have private central banks, as long as we have large banks of any kind, there are going to be wars. Because that's where the bankers make the most of their money. Wars are the bankers' richest harvest of debt. And they love it. They absolutely love it. And they don't care which side wins or loses. They loan money to both sides. And then when it's all over, they loan more money to both sides to rebuild from the war. It's a scam. It's another scam. And it's played out many, many times over the last 300 years. And yes, it applies to World War I and World War II. It's like I was telling that caller earlier. It's all about the money. It's all about manufacturing. It's about preserving your marketplace. If your country is failing economically, you recover it with a war. Great Britain and U.S. couldn't compete with Germany. U.S. had a crash in 1907. Let's go to war. We'll take down our competition. We can't out-manufacture and outsell Germany. We'll just bomb them into rubble. It's almost like the mafia. Somebody sets up a bar nearby that's nicer than yours and they're doing a better business, you just go on over and you rub them out. It's exactly that kind of thinking. It's just on a larger scale is all. Another article about Klaus Eberwein. This was a Haitian government official that was exposing the Clinton Foundation. He's been found dead in Miami. Another entry on the dead bodies list. A lot of wet work, especially that guy, the one who was going to try and use hackers to recover the 30,000 missing Hillary emails. And now he's dead. He's been suicided. Now, as you know, over on Mount Vesuvius, there's been a huge, huge fire. It almost looked like Vesuvius itself was erupting, but it wasn't. It was just a brush fire on the slopes. And it did cause a lot of tourists to flee, some locals as well. For some reason, they're saying the mafia, the Russia Today is saying that the mafia is accused of starting this fire. We don't know why. Maybe they want to wreck the tourism business and then buy up the hotels and resorts for pennies on the dollar. And that has been known to happen as well, where you'll go on out and you'll deliberately wreck somebody's business to force them to sell it at a low price to you. That happened here in the United States, associated with some of these E. coli contaminations, where there's this big meatpacking company, and all of a sudden they're hit with repeated allegations of E. coli. Their business drops off. They get into financial trouble, and all of a sudden they're forced to sell. We'll be right back after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show. Coming up on the top of the hour, and the lovely Lady Claire. And apparently Tucker Carlson was interviewing Democratic Congressman David Cicilline, who claimed on Carlson's show that Russia Today is simply a Russian propaganda machine. And like the American corporate media isn't a U.S. government propaganda machine. There's this double standard. It's okay for us to lie to the world, but Russia better not do that. And again, no evidence for it whatsoever. At this point, though, anybody who's reporting on the facts of what's going on is a Russian asset or a Russian stooge. And everybody else is out there screaming these baseless allegations about Donald Trump, and they're getting more and more hysterical about it. Now, over at CNN, there was a moment of honesty because Alison Camerota said earlier today she's getting Russia fatigue. She's sick and tired of all these stories about Russia and how she comes into work praying that something else will have happened that they can talk about. And there have actually been an analysis done that show the corporate media is spending literally half of their on-air time talking about Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia, Trump, Russia. And there's no there, and they're not getting any traction with it. Now, we were talking earlier about Amazon and how large it's become and how successful it's become, and one of the reasons it has is they get a special deal from the post office. Over at Citigroup, they did an analysis and discovered that basically every box shipped by Amazon through the post office essentially gets a $1.46 subsidy. Amazon pays less for their shipping than you do, and you, collectively the taxpayers, are picking up the tab for part of Amazon's shipping. Wow, no wonder they've become incredibly rich. And you have to wonder, why do very large, successful companies get taxpayer-funded subsidies and small, struggling companies do not? Well, because our government favors large, monopolistic companies. They're very generous campaign donors here. Somebody just wrote in on the email box, why not everyone just stop paying credit card debt, make our own Jubilee? Yeah, we do need a Jubilee. We need a reset. somebody's got to say this has gone on long enough. It's time to just hit the reset button, because absent that, there's going to be rioting and civil war in the streets. Let's see. For some reason, there have been more of these acid attacks in central London. 2 teenagers, a 15-year-old and 16-year-old, have been arrested as police launch a major investigation into a series of acid attacks that took place in less than 90 minutes in East London on Thursday night. That is so sick to do that. I can't. All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, the lovely Lady Claire will be with us. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, hour number 3. And for those of you watching on BAM User, this gorgeous creature sitting next to me is the lovely Lady Claire, who likes to come in on the 3rd hour every Friday with her unique perspective on the world. And a quick reminder, the phone lines are open, 800-313-9443. So, Claire, what's the first thing you want to talk about?
Well, a little bit of good news when it comes to pesticides. Apparently, Tennessee has restricted the use of Monsanto pesticide called dicamba on Thursday and imposed restrictions on its use. And the problem with this stuff is that it can drift away from crops that have been genetically modified to withstand it to crops that haven't. And there have been huge losses of soybean, cotton, and other crops along the southwestern United States. And farmers have been pitted against other farmers with lost crops and brought lawsuits against dicamba producers.
Now, this dicamba, if I recall correctly, this is the one that combines glyphosate with the dioxin compound from Agent Orange.
Oh, wonderful, yes.
I think that's the one here. But the idea that you're spraying a pesticide on a plant and it can lift off and go someplace else and cause damage. Didn't the people at Monsanto even check for this before they went to the marketplace?
Apparently not, because now Monsanto is complaining that it spent years working to make dicamba stickier and limit drift when it is sprayed. And, of course, they're lawyering up, as they always do.
Oh, yes.
And, but it's a moment of sanity on the part of some of these states like Tennessee. Good on you, Tennessee, for doing this. This stuff is it's murderous, and people are dealing with the consequences. And another article about the environment. Apparently, in the process of fracking wastewaters, there has been massive contamination of adjacent rivers. And the vast amount of wastewater produced by fracking can contaminate rivers, lakes, and other waterways with radioactive materials and hormone-affecting chemicals, according to new research. And the study tested sediments and groundwater downstream of a treatment plant in Pennsylvania, was designed to make the water used as part of the fracking process fit to release into the environment.
And yet downstream from this processing plant, it's still contaminated.
Gosh. And what they found, and this was from Penn State U and other academic institutions, discovered that despite this process, there were high loads of chloride, barium, strontium, radium, and organic compounds in the Conemaugh River watershed. Oh boy, not good. Sediment streams in Blacklick Creek, just downstream from one treatment plant, was found to contain 200 times the level of radium upstream of the plant. And the highest concentration of radium from these fracking processes was just 14% below the level at which it would have to have been treated at radioactive waste in the U.S. Now, Mike, if in fact the data these academics put together is correct, why in the name of heaven is this process still being allowed to continue? And it's a 5-letter word, money.
Money. It makes money.
Yeah.
Things that make money are good. Things that get in the way of making money are bad. And that's it's really what it comes on down to. The U.S. government, U.S. oil corporations, they're desperate, and they're working together hand in hand to say, well, we can't reach the oil that's really deep in the crust, so let's go with this shale fracturing, and we'll harvest that oil and gas for sale, and it'll be perfectly harmless. And, of course, it never has been.
No.
The whole theory of fracking was they were going to drill down into these shale formations. They were going to pump this toxic radioactive cocktail of chemicals down there to crack the rock and then suck the oil and gas on out, and that somehow the original fracking fluids would just magically stay down there. And it simply is not happening.
Wrong.
It's being pumped right back up to the surface with the oil and the gas, and they're just dumping it. Yeah. Plus, once the shale is cracked, these fluids can leak out in other directions as well. And we've been hearing about all these stories about ponds and lakes and rivers where the fish all of a sudden die off, and the excuse is always given, oh, well, the water was depleted of oxygen, and they stop there. And what they're not telling you is when methane, which is another one of these products coming out of these fracking wells, bubbles up through water, the methane will combine with the free oxygen to form carbon dioxide and more water molecules. And the carbon dioxide bubbles up into the atmosphere, giving Al Gore apoplexy. And that's why the water is depleted. When you bubble methane through water, any oxygen in there is taken out. Yeah. Any life forms in there dependent upon that oxygen are going to suffocate.
Yeah. And, you know, in looking at this, it's never the executives of the companies doing the fracking who have to live with the environmental and health consequences of these processes. It's always the quote-unquote flyover expendable Americans who are forced to live with the consequences of these practices.
Oh, you never see fracking wells in Beverly Hills or the Hamptons?
No, definitely not. And, of course, the oil companies are very generous contributors to both parties. So don't expect that the political class is going to attempt to get this taken care of. What I think is going to need to be done, I think what we
pump
need...
the political class down those fracking wells.
I never thought of that. Okay. Actually, what I was thinking was more in line with the Erin Brockovich cases.
Yes.
And massive, massive fines to compensate these families for what the health crises that they've gone through.
Well, that would be ideal here. We're going to do a shout-out now to our on-air affiliates who are rejoining our network. Civil actions like that would be ideal. Unfortunately, since the time of Erin Brockovich and the PG&E lawsuit, again, the laws have been changed to make it harder and harder for ordinary citizens or class actions to go after these giant corporations. The government's attitude is the corporations are important because they are a source of revenue, and you ordinary people, there's too many of you anyway, so just, if you weren't poor and worthless, you wouldn't be living near these wells anyway.
Ouch.
Actually, that's not exactly true, because I remember seeing one of these documentaries about fracking where there was this very nice, very rural mountain, almost kind of a vacation area that was being developed for vacation homes, very expensive vacation homes.
Yeah.
And they had documented how this family had gone on in, they'd bought the land, and they'd built a very, very nice home. I think it was something like $1 million home. And then all of a sudden they found they couldn't use the tap water. In fact, they could literally turn on a water tap, hold a cigarette lighter to it, and it would burst into flame. That's
not good.
And so now the house is toxic. They can't live in it, and they certainly can't sell it. Nobody's going to buy a home, with toxic fluid coming out of those water pipes. And so, it's just a case of corporations running rampant over the individual human beings in this country.
Yeah, it's very unfortunate. Apparently, the U.S. has been bombing with white phosphorus while blaming Assad for using sarin.
But our chemical weapons are good. And his chemical weapons are bad.
Yeah.
Yes.
On June 14th of this year, Human Rights Watch headlined Danger from U.S. White Phosphorus and linked to far more evidence of America's firebombings in Syria and Iraq than has ever been presented by Americans.
Against Assad?
Yes, against Assad. And this is really nasty. On April, yes.
I was going to say, for those who don't know, white phosphorus is a banned chemical weapon under international convention. Its only allowed use is to create smoke screens to basically conceal your forces from the other guy's forces. That's usually done on the ground. It is expressly forbidden to use white phosphorus over residential areas for two reasons. One, it is highly incendiary. You can burn an entire town to the ground with just one of these white phosphorus devices. And if it gets on people, it literally chemically burns into your skin. There's no way to put it on and out. In fact, if you throw water on it, it's going to get more energetic. Goes right to the bone, usually resulting in amputation. And yet, we've seen Israel using these weapons against the people of Gaza, and the U.S. is using them against civilians in Iraq and Syria. And again, Claire has hit the hypocrisy on the head here. The U.S. is using these banned chemical weapons. The corporate media says nothing about it. But we're going to accuse Assad of using sarin on his own people without any evidence, and it's banner headline news.
Yeah.
Assad is evil. Film at 11.
Russia and Syria have urged an independent investigation to determine what actually happened on April 4th, which was followed on April 7th by the Moab drop. But it was blocked by Western delegations without any explanation. You know, folks, and I've mentioned this, I take what I do on the site very seriously, and as a Christian pacifist activist, I am appalled, and I'm angry that I'm a citizen of a country which so frequently indulges in war crimes with such impunity. If in fact this is what is truly the meaning of American exceptionalism, which appears to translate as assassinate as will to support specific geopolitical agendas, I don't want any of it. Thank you very much.
I think what they mean by that, American exceptionalism, is the laws apply to everybody except us.
Yeah, well, yeah, and the bombing shows it. There was a wonderful bit with Tucker Carlson, who I'm beginning to have a little more appreciation of.
We had a caller on the show today saying, he's about the only thing still worth watching on Fox.
Yeah. And apparently he just humiliated a neocon, Max Boot, on national TV. Because Boot was saying, Russia's the number one problem. Russia's the number one problem. And over the past 30 years, the neocons have presided over the worst foreign policies in American history. The article states, pursuing their Trotskyite dreams of war that have accelerated to an ebb tide that peaked during Bush's reign. Men like Boot, Paul Wolfowitz, Don Rumsfeld, Bill Kristol, Richard Pearl, and many others have attached themselves to the Republican Party like a cancerous tumor, transforming it from a checkered pants, cigar-smoked room boys club into a satanic cult out for the blood of the indigenous.
Well, these people are going to latch on to whoever's got the power, whether they call themselves neocons or neoliberals, but it's the same thing. Get next to the people who've got the power and manipulate them into going along with this agenda. And they used to be called the Project for the New American Century.
PNAC.
And now it's got a new name, the Project for New America's Security or something. Or the Center for New American Security. But it's the same bunch of people, it's the same agenda. The U.S. is going to conquer the world, and the world will do what the United States says. I can't think of Paul Wolfowitz without that video of him licking his own comb flashing before my eyes.
That was a little...
That was gross.
That was very...
Yeah.
Let's go over to Iran, and Trump is having to admit that Iran is complying with the nuclear deal. Now, during the campaign, he repeatedly offered the idea of the U.S. pulling out of the P5+1 nuclear deal with Iran, and trying to claim that Iran wasn't keeping up its end of the bargain. The problem is, they are.
Yeah, they are.
Facing a deadline of Monday, President Trump is going to have to recertify to Congress that Iran is totally complying with its obligations under the P5+1 deal, which effectively delays his expected effort to force a renegotiation that no other party to the treaty wants to do.
Well, the idea of a renegotiation is the U.S. war hawks, especially those who are serving Israel's interests, they want to expand the requirements of the deal beyond nuclear technology to include Iran's defensive missile systems.
It's the camel's nose under the tent.
Very much so.
Yeah. And I would like to offer President Trump a word. Attempting to double down on lies to cause the P5+1 deal to collapse, as did your ambassador to the UN, Nikki Haley, is just plain counterproductive, not to mention painfully embarrassing when the IAEA itself, which is constantly inspecting Iran's sites, states plainly that it continues to be in compliance with the agreement.
Yeah, and here's the problem. It's going to underscore the fact that the United States has not kept up their side of the bargain.
Yeah.
Much of Iran's money is still frozen in this country. The sanctions are still very much in place.
Yep.
And again shows that making a deal with the United States is really kind of a fool's errand, because you're not going to get a fair shake on that. All right, we're going to take a couple of phone calls here.
Okay.
Steve in California, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, I talked to you a couple weeks ago about a scam about somebody trying to get in my wife's computer and calling and saying there's a virus on your computer and we'll help you get it off. I told you about that whole scam and how the caller was very abrupt and very nasty, actually, finally hanging up. So we knew it wasn't being recorded and this wasn't a legit concern at all. They were actually supposedly representing Microsoft. Well, today, the second extension of that scam started today. My wife got on a computer, and she said her computer's frozen up. Basically, it was ransomware saying, you need to call this number, and we can take care of it through your computer. We'll talk you through the system. And they were representing supposedly Amazon. That's the scam you'll see on your computer if people start seeing this. They'll say they represent that your Amazon account has been hacked, compromised, and they'll help you fix this situation. But if you go on another computer, because they actually freeze up that one computer, I used my other computer, went on the Amazon account, on my wife's account, and looked it up, and there was no notification, no problems. The account was clear. But they showed you a whole bunch of other supposed purchases on your account that were stopped or frozen, and they're trying to convince you that somebody had hacked into your Amazon account and that they're trying to make purchases, but basically they just want to get in your computer and get your numbers, your identity. So I just want to let you know about this, that they're supposedly representing Amazon and trying to help you with this problem, but it's a 1-800 number. I assume they got an 800 number to fool everybody to think it looks legit. Everything looks legit, sounds legit in their wording on the internet, but then when I did a scan later on my other computer about Amazon scam, it started back on the 4th, this scam. So people are now coming to figure this out, and they're reporting on the internet an Amazon scam, so keep an eye out for this thing.
All right. Well, thank you very much for that.
Good to know.
I mean, we live in an age where the scammers are just running rampant over all of us. It's open season on ordinary Americans. And again, where is the NSA in all this? Are they the scammers, or are they merely incompetent? Could be both. Where's the FBI? If you get hit by ransomware, the official recommendation of the FBI is pay the ransom. Well, if you guys can't actually do anything about this, then turn in your badges and find some other line of work and stop being a waste of taxpayer money. Because from my point of view, if you can't stop all of this computer crime, then you are completely and utterly useless. And if we shut down the FBI, then at the very least, we're going to avoid having more innocent patsies set up and framed for bogus terror attacks for the benefit of newspaper headlines.
Amen to that.
But, I mean, everybody's got to look at this, how completely, wildly out of control all of this fraud and scam and cybercrime is, and realize that the government has absolutely failed in one of its most fundamental requirements and duties, which is to protect us from this sort of thing. And again...
Well, Mike, I wanted to say one thing real quick, that it does freeze your computer up. You cannot X out of this at all. So what you need to do is do the Control-Alt-Delete, get out that way, then go back into click immediately on your security, what you have, whether it's whatever you have for security for antivirus software. Do a full scan, virus scan, completely scan at that point. It will find this ransomware, fix it, and then you have access back to that computer. So you can't get back in on your computer on any other website. You have to go out, Control-Alt-Delete, then go to your antivirus software, do a full scan on your computer. It will fix it, and then you get it back.
All right, well, that's also good to know, and that's actually a very common fix for a lot of these scam software. It's not particularly sophisticated stuff. It's basically just locking up your browser, and that has to do with some of the weaknesses in the browser coding as well. A lot of sloppy coding out there as these various companies start to slash their QA and quality control staffs just to save a few more bucks so the boss can have another yacht. Well, thank you very much for that information. I'm going to hunt that down and get that posted. But, yeah, we live in an age of outright scams, and you have to look at that and realize that each and every one of these scams proves to us the NSA is completely useless, the FBI is completely useless, The CIA is completely useless, and that was the point I wanted to make to you before, because there was an article we ran today where the reason Donald Trump sent those cruise missiles into Syria was the head of the CIA assured him they were 100% certain Assad had gassed his own people. So we know the CIA is lying to President Trump to manipulate him the way the CIA lied to John F. Kennedy to manipulate him.
For the Bay of Pigs.
For the Bay of, well, and various other things as well.
Yeah.
Trump needs to understand he is being used and manipulated by people he thought he could trust. We're going to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show here. And we've got a lot of callers waiting on the line, so let's get some phone calls done. George in Texas, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, good. Happy Friday, Mike.
Happy Friday.
I'm into that.
TGIF.
Yes, you know, the thing is about antitrust, what really makes me mad about the Justice Department, they're worried about these 26 states with medical marijuana he's going after. I'm like, you know, a lot of these monopolies, Mike, are just about as big as a national security threat is more of a national security threat than Assad's chemical weapons, if they really exist.
Oh, yeah.
And,
if you look at how many Americans are being killed by medical mistakes every year, and the opioid the prescription opioid epidemic, that's killing a lot more people than the terrorists are.
Yeah, and the thing is like, Donald Trump has come out publicly against Amazon being a monopoly, and you know how it's hurting the average retail sector. And you know, Jeff Sessions is worried about medical marijuana states. I mean, I haven't met a pot smoker that's been a threat to me, you know. But anyway, and
what Sessions is doing is he's protecting big tobacco and big alcohol.
Yeah.
And he's also protecting the pharmaceutical industries, who are absolutely terrified of the fact that there are a lot of very common ailments that can be treated at home with marijuana, which means you don't go to the doctor and spend money there. You don't go to the pharmacy and spend money there. It's the goal of all the corporations to make you dependent on them and their products. You're not allowed to cure yourself. You're not allowed to grow your own food. You're not allowed to build things for you. Everything that you want has to come from a corporation, including your drinking water now. We even got that from the CEO of Nestle before it came on out that all of the tap water systems in our country are all of a sudden highly toxic and unfit for drinking, that water should be commoditized. Next, it'll be air. They'll be putting air, you know, they'll smog up the atmosphere to the point of unbreathability and then offer to sell you air in tanks.
Well, I recommend your listeners do this too about like trying to repeal the Unaffordable Health Care Act. It's more like I've been calling the White House, leaving a comment saying, if you want to get Obamacare fully repealed, take away Congress's waiver not to comply with the Affordable Health Care Act.
Good idea.
See how fast.
Good idea. If they have to abide by it, it's going to improve quick.
The problem is the waiver is in the Affordable Care Act.
Yeah.
Trump can't simply say it should have been taken out with a line item veto, but it wasn't. Anything else, George?
No, that's it. Have a great weekend, Claire and Mike.
You too.
Same to
Thanks.
you. And we're going to switch over to Alex in Florida. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello and good evening. And I was calling because Julian Assange told us that one thing Trump has accomplished is that we are well aware of the deep state. And I want to say they are showing their ass for sure. I mean, it's so clear.
They're in a panic.
There's
They're in a complete panic, and
government.
Everything that they're doing is only eroding their credibility that much more. They're still out there screaming Trump-Russia collusion, and yet polls are showing that, like that CNN host, most Americans are on Russia burnout. They're sick and tired of hearing of all of this. It's actually building sympathy for Donald Trump and his family as we see them just under this constant smear attack. And it's just further eroding the credibility of the corporate media, because every one of these news stories that comes on out, Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin were holding hands or something, it's eventually discredited, and they just go on to the next one after that.
That's right. And I hate to say it, I think that the DNC servers are probably in the incinerator with the black boxes from the planes on 9/11.
Probably.
I don't think they're around. I'm serious. I think they're gone.
Well, here's my question.
Which is it?
Here's my question. If the NSA has been monitoring all of our computer traffic all this time, why don't they have Hillary Clinton's missing 33,000 emails?
They do. They do, but they're the deep state.
Yeah, okay.
We're not going to get them. I mean, it's everybody. Plus, in regards to the marijuana issue, people will not be going to the liquor store to be buying beer and alcohol.
Oh, yeah,
that's
absolutely.
just the point.
That's the point.
Yeah.
Alex, got to let you go. Got to take a break for commercials. Back with more phone calls after these few words. And aloha, America. Welcome back to the show. We're going to go right back to the telephones. Jennifer in Texas. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I'm super glad to talk to you. I have so much to say, but my question's for Claire.
I'm right here.
Okay. Well, it's kind of for Mike at first.
Okay.
So I've been listening to you for 2 years. I'm a third generation school teacher, and I got a DWI. So whenever I got a DWI, I couldn't teach for a while, and then I started reinvestigating every single thing I've ever learned. My major's in government, right?
Okay.
So I started listening to you, and everything you ever before anything ever happened 2 years ago, everything you ever wanted to happen is happening now.
Yeah.
Do you not see that?
Yeah,
Anyway,
and I hate being right all the time, too.
I know, but here's what I want to say to you, Mike. Claire, probably about maybe 2 months ago, she was trying to tell you, this is spiritual warfare, and you kind of blew her off a little bit. You know what I'm saying? It's amazing to me that, here, I want to back up. I'm very perceptive, and my parents didn't have a good marriage. I'm a lesbian, so I didn't have a good marriage. But, I told my daughter one day, people have good marriages. You guys have a good marriage. I mean, I know that.
Yes.
Thank you, yes.
It's the best thing in my life.
Yes.
We're both very blessed.
She doesn't. I can tell. But, I just feel like if you would, do you have a faith of a mustard seed, Mike?
I have I'm sorry. Could you slow down a little bit? I'm having trouble understanding you.
I'm sorry. I have ADHD. Okay, do you have the faith of a mustard seed, Mike?
Thank you, I think.
No, it's a biblical reference.
Ah, okay.
Yes.
Okay.
A faith means a
Do
tiny
you
bit
have
of faith.
Okay.
I'm asking you.
Well, let me back up here a little bit. First of all, the fact that you're a lesbian does not preclude a happy marriage. Claire and I are familiar with a lesbian couple who have a very successful, wonderful marriage, and they just had their first child as well. So
and they're doing great.
They're doing great. So there's hope out there for that.
But you know what? I'm lesbian. I think now I think I'm actually a poor black man that I self-identify as a black dude because I can get laid and I'm broke, and I'm also kind of really cool like a black guy.
Okay, now let me answer one other point that you raised. When Claire was bringing up the idea of spiritual warfare,
yes.
I don't have a clear understanding of what spiritual means, and so it's not a subject that I'm competent to discuss. But I understand that there are.
One time and you kind of blew her off.
Well, I didn't mean to be rude.
No. He didn't. But trust me. This gentleman treats me as though I were platinum, and he and I have some differences of perception, and I love him. And I tell people at my church, Mike is not a faith guy. He's not a God guy, but he is one of the most personally moral men I have ever met this lifetime. And this is one of the reasons.
This happened to me recently.
I'm still in love with him, even more in love with him than when we first met. So
Ditto.
Sometimes in love you get lucky,
Okay, well, Jennifer, we're going to let you go here at this point and switch over to Tom in Philadelphia. Tom, thank you for waiting so patiently. What's on your mind?
Hey, good afternoon. Did you happen to see that Nat Geo live special they had last week with all the animals all over the world?
No, I didn't.
Okay, they had cameras all over the world taking pictures, live video of cheetahs and blah blah blah. Well, they had a contest on there where they wanted the viewers to vote on which animal they thought was the best, and it was down between a bear and a lion and a monkey or something. And the bear won, and the woman who was running the thing, says, and we want to let you know that there was absolutely no tampering with the Russian bear votes. They just had it open in everywhere. Yeah, if you get a chance to watch that, it's really a mess. Now, the guy who just called in a few minutes ago about that virus, the Amazon thing.
Yeah.
That's not really ransomware, because if it was ransomware, you don't get your stuff back unless you pay him money. He mainly had what's called scareware.
Yes.
And most of the time you can just go in and go to the task manager, kill Internet Explorer, and then just don't go back to the page you were on, and you should be okay. But it's always good to do a virus scan afterwards, like he recommended.
Oh,
okay?
I'm running on virus scans on this machine literally constantly.
Mine.
Yeah.
Yeah, I bought the premium Malwarebytes, which seems to be a very good app.
That is a very good one. The best defense is to have multiple layers, and I'm not going to go into the details of what we have here, but there's about 4 or 5 different things running on this machine all at the same time, and sometimes they don't always agree with each other, but sometimes they do. Okay?
Well, it's not good to have 2 different antiviruses, but I run like Symantec, I run Malwarebytes, and I run Spybot. And those seem to keep me out of trouble. Have a good weekend. Thank you.
All right, thanks an awful lot. Now, Malwarebytes and Spybot are about adware and that kind of minor nuisances. If you're talking about blocking ransomware, Kaspersky actually put out a free tool that you can download to proof your system against ransomware. Of course, you're going to get a follow-up phone call saying, would you like to buy the premium version? But it is a major problem. And again, every time there's another ransomware infection, and they've reached a dangerous point where they're infecting hospital computer systems and locking patient data away from practicing physicians, potentially at a critical time in their care. We could see people actually dying from this stuff, and the NSA is doing nothing, the FBI is doing nothing, the CIA is doing nothing, which in my mind makes them all completely useless and a waste of money. Okay? Okay, I guess we lost Tom. Sal in Colorado, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Good afternoon. I want to correct you on what you stated, that the government is supposed to be protecting us from the Internet. Well, they have no duty to protect us. And there's a court case that states that. It's called Bowers versus DeVito, 686 Fed 2nd 616. And it says here, the Constitution is a charter of negative liberties. It tells the state to let people alone. It does not require the federal government or the state to provide services, even so elementary a service as maintaining law and order.
But yet the government, hang on, but yet the government takes our money, and there is at least a verbal contract that part of the reason they're taking that money to fund the FBI and the CIA and the NSA is to protect our society from certain threats. And the NSA is funded on the theory that it is supposed to be protecting our IT infrastructure. So at the very least, we can say that they're taking taxpayer money under false pretenses.
Correct.
Okay.
It's supposed to be protecting our rights, not us, period.
Well, we both come to the same thing. Fire the NSA, fire the CIA, and fire the FBI.
Right.
Okay. All right. Well, listen, Sal, we're going to let you go because we're running out of time here. And apparently Tom in Philadelphia called back to say Malwarebytes Premium does block ransomware. And we're going to go to Murr in Wisconsin. Aloha, Murr. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Oh, hi.
Hi.
Yeah, I'm the one that gave you the comfrey thing. But, I was thinking, you're probably one of the only venues left where I could actually bring up the idea of celebrating the Moonwalk Day next Thursday.
Yes.
Yes, because so many now are trying to say, oh, no, it didn't happen, blah, blah, blah. Mm-hmm. And I beg to differ.
Well, that kind of stuff, Apollo was faked, or Bigfoot and the Loch Ness Monster's love child, and HARP and chemtrails. That's the kind of stuff. Hang on. That's the kind of nonsense the government and the corporate media are trying to pour all over the internet and independent media to damage our credibility, to try and at least level the playing field, if not regain the upper hand. Of course, I personally worked on Apollo 12 post-mission, and was very much involved with that. I've also personally done the experiment with the lasers and the laser ranging retroreflectors that were left behind at all of the Apollo landing sites. And by the way, Mythbusters even did that on one of their episodes.
Okay, but here's what I wanted to say.
Yeah.
On 2012, on 7/20,
Yes.
excuse me, that's when it was ripped away from us with the Aurora Theater false flag. And Holmes' mother was in court both times and testified that the FBI...
Are you okay?
Yeah, I think so. Let me pour a little water here real quick.
All right, take a gulp of water. Everybody grab water. Time. All right, here we go.
Okay, the FBI took him as an infant and raised him. Okay.
I'm sorry,
and you remember Holmes.
Okay.
James Holmes.
The shooter.
But his father, Robert... Okay, now the Sandy Hook thing, Jim Fetzer's got that right.
Yes.
I think pretty close to it, and Sophia Smallstorm and a few others, but...
Wolfgang Halberg, he's got it. He's got a good lock on it.
Yes, Halberg, and James Tracy. I mean, all these people suffered for telling the truth.
Yes.
But yeah, this Adam Lanza never existed. You know, they basically told Ryan he better shut up because Peter Lanza, the father, both Peter Lanza and Robert Holmes were to testify about LIBOR. And there again, you'll find, trying to say, oh, that was debunked. No, it was not debunked.
Yeah, LIBOR was a big stink, and the funny thing is, for all that they were saying it's a hoax, it's a conspiracy theory, and then finally some people actually did go to jail for that one.
Mm-hmm. Yep. But they were to testify, those two fellows. So, Ms. Lanza is probably on a sunny beach somewhere, sunny a beach.
or he's been put into the witness protection program, which means he's in a shallow grave somewhere in Nevada.
Yeah, or her. Yeah, but Adam didn't exist. He never did exist. I mean, you can see it's photoshopped, everything about him.
Well, at this point, we all know it was a hoax, and we don't need to really get caught up in the fine details
Here's
back
that.
and forth. Same thing with 9/11, same thing with the Boston Marathon bombing. We know the government was lying to us and trying to fool us. We all agree on the major points. Let's just forget about the minor details and move forward. It is time for the American people to say, okay, we have a government that lies to us about pretty much everything, and a corporate media that lies to us about pretty much everything except the sports scores and the weather, and they're not that good on the weather. What are we as a population of freedom-loving Americans going to do about this? Because that time is now upon us. Anyway, Murr, thank you very much for the phone call. I hope your throat is feeling a little bit better, and we're going to go back to the lady Claire. Claire, what is next on your list?
Well, apparently, the U.S. government doubled down fuel support for Saudi Arabia bombing campaign in Yemen after a deadly strike on a funeral last October. And there was a Saudi-led coalition hit of a funeral, killed more than 130 people, and drew a lot of condemnation.
Including the ones who were already dead.
Yeah, okay. Yet in the months following the strike, the United States doubled down on the amount of fuel it provided to coalition deaths. According to figures obtained from the U.S. military, the numbers underline the fact that the U.S. support for the campaign has not only continued, but also has grown. And now we're seeing maybe a little bit more attention to the civilian casualties and alleged war crimes by the coalition. Unfortunately, the House of Representatives just passed over a chance to vote in legislation that would have tracked the fuel the Pentagon gives to the Saudi coalition and prohibited refueling of coalition aircraft unless the Pentagon could assure Congress that subsequent missions wouldn't hit civilians or targets contained on no-strike lists. And, it's very hard for me. I love this country a lot. I love what I understand it used to represent. But to be a citizen of a country which enables Saudi war crimes in Yemen, it just repulses me, Mike. It makes me just absolutely furious. And, what is happening is these bombings in Yemen are creating the assassinations of infants, children, and the elderly physically infirm. And this is what is being done in Yemen with your tax dollars and in your name. And, Mike, I think we need to have a national dialogue on how enabling the Saudi genocide in Yemen is protecting us and the quality of life here in the U.S., because I can't see a darn thing that it is.
That's not what it's doing. I mean, basically, there was a successful intervention of Yemen some years back where the U.S. went on in. They toppled the democratically elected government. They put in a puppet. The people of Yemen don't want to live under foreign puppet rule. And so they tried to kick out the puppet ruler and bring back their own government. The United States, knowing that the American people are getting tired of all these wars, got Saudi Arabia to act as their proxy to go on in and slap the Yemen people around and say, once you are conquered, you will stay conquered and you will learn to love your foreign puppet ruler. And the people of Yemen so far are saying, no.
I don't think so.
No.
Yeah, yeah. Another article that I linked to today from Jason Dietz at antiwar.com. I consider him a very sober and intelligent writer on geopolitical issues. And the title of this is Don't Be Fooled, There Is No Diplomacy with North Korea. And China and South Korea are trying to encourage the U.S. to do a diplomatic approach, and there are several themes and variations on this. And at the core, it involves North Korea totally freezing both their nuclear and missile programs, the U.S. halting war games and reducing the American military footprint on the Korean Peninsula. It's not a bad deal, and it gives the U.S. exactly what it wants. That South Korea is backing the deal is particularly significant, showing that they're willing to give up the annual war exercise and see some U.S. troops withdraw from their territories. But the White House simply is rejecting these offers just out of hand. Not going to happen, not going to happen.
Well, as far as South Korea is concerned, it's not a question of a willingness to give up the U.S. troops. They want the U.S. troops gone. They want the THAAD gone. And once again, we have the U.S. government taking this attitude of, we have a right to go into anybody's country at any time for any reason that we want. And that's what's making enemies around the world. They don't hate America because we have freedoms. A lot of countries have freedoms. They hate the United States of America because we have this bad habit of mucking about with other people's countries.
Yeah, it's very bad, and it looks like it's about to get a little bit worse. I'd like to go into something right before the break.
Okay.
Apparently in Ukraine, it has de facto turned into a NATO military platform sharpened for use against Russia. And these days, there's an airport in Odessa which has been turned over to NATO, and manages to receive and send military aircraft with staff and equipment. And the Odessa Patriotic Dumskaya Net publication was...
We've got to take a break.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back after this commercial with the last segment of our Pauhana Friday program. Aloha, America. Welcome back to our show, last segment of our Pauhana Friday program here, and we're talking about how Ukraine is effectively becoming a NATO forward base to contain Russian aggression. And I'm so sick of hearing that expression because Russia is not the aggressor here. We don't see Russian soldiers and artillery on the northern side of our border with Canada. We don't see them on the southern side of our border with Mexico. We don't have Russian aircraft carrier battle groups sailing around the Gulf of Mexico. Okay, we know who the aggressor is here. So.
And what's happening is NATO is upgrading the former Soviet military air base in Artsis, and they're going to be doing all kinds of operations out of it, including sub-hunters.
Okay.
Not good. The Poseidon, R8?
Yes.
Yeah. This does not augur well for peace and calm in the area at all.
Well, they're expecting submarine warfare down there in the Black Sea.
Yeah. Okay. Haven't they been doing some? Hasn't the U.S. been doing some exercises down there?
They've been doing exercises with surface vessels. Now, supposedly, access to the Black Sea is monitored very closely at the Bosphorus, and it's very hard for a submarine to get through. And I could imagine that in the event of a war, that probably Turkey will install anti-submarine nets that are just deep enough to allow surface ships over, but not submarines.
Okay. And it looks like Turkey and Russia are coming closer together in terms of any defense.
Yes.
That's, well, with a failed coup, I can understand Erdogan maybe saying, I don't know that I want to look at American military hardware right now.
Well, there's a couple of reasons for that.
Mm-hmm.
One is a certain degree of resentment.
Yeah.
But again, Russia is using Syria to demonstrate how well their weapons work in a real combat environment.
Yep.
Whereas American weapons aren't even doing all that well in the controlled tests.
Right.
Russia just sent what's called the Terminator tank into Syria, and they're expecting that's going to perform very well. Their aircraft have been performing very well.
Yeah.
More and more countries are saying, let's go buy our weapons from Russia. They're cheaper, they work better. What's not to like?
Yeah. I wish that we could change the military procurement culture in this country, because we're getting stuck with stuff like the F-35, for heaven's sakes. And they're not even going to be able to do full testing of that until next year.
Yeah, absolutely. And yet it's already in production, and they're already deploying it. Oh, wow, we got a brand new airplane. We don't know if it's going to work. It's never been tested. We know the software for the gun won't be here for 2 years, and they still can't get the helmets. But, boy, doesn't it look cool sitting there on the flight line.
Yeah.
Oh, we need another Harry Truman is what we need.
Yeah.
Because in the years going into World War II, he went out, while he was a senator, he went out and he kicked some serious rear end to get those defense contractors to actually start providing what they promised they were going to provide for the prices they promised to sell it for.
Yeah.
And we need that.
And we don't have it. And, of course, the weapons industry is very generous with political
contributions.
They
absolutely are. They absolutely are.
Yeah.
I mean, until you've directly experienced the kind of money that flows through a military contractor, it is difficult to believe unless you see it for yourself. All right, there's the music. It's time for Claire and I to get on out of here. Have a really good weekend. Please stay tuned for John Stadmiller's show. He's got a couple of really exciting guests that you're going to want to listen to, so don't touch that dial. We'll be back on Monday. Aloha, America.